Hello, I'm scientist John Pendleton, and this is our 8th conference about creation, evolution, dinosaurs, UFOs, the Bible. And today we're going to talk about mutations. And also this is like the first part of 2. We're going to have a continuing part on mutations and also a special section within that about cloning. Here we have what's called the famous tree of life. And of course we have the different tips of this tree are known plants and animals, insects, and creatures that we know. At the base of it is an amoeba, which supposedly all life has come through. And of course the whole idea is that life evolved, and that by mutations and beneficial mutations, genetic changes of the DNA, things got better and better. My youngest son, when he was studying in his 6th year of primary school, had this text which was used here in Mexico, and what it translates as the following. This is about the section on evolution. It says, the branches of biology such as genetics, paleontology, that's the study of fossils, embryology, and comparative anatomy fortify the theory of evolution of the species. Now this is their statement. This is a publication by the Department of Education in Mexico. Any Department of Education in the world, you could probably find the same thing. So first let's go with comparative anatomy. This shows us different limbs from a salamander, a man, a bat, and a horse. And of course they all have parts that are the same names. Why? Because man has put those same names there. Now obviously they definitely look similar to some degree. Not because they have a common ancestor, but because they have a common designer, a common creator. Now for example, here we can look at these 4 different hands, if you please, from a tarsier, a gibbon, a chimpanzee, and a human. And there's definitely some similarities. For one thing, they all have 5 fingers, and they're more or less similarly distributed. But we want to look here at this part that says a serious problem for homology. Homology being that similarity, that oneness. And so we amplify that section. And what we see here is a comparative of the genes that control the forelimbs and hind limbs, or hind feet, of different creatures and wings of birds. And the idea is that these creatures by mutations have evolved from fish into amphibians, amphibians into reptiles, reptiles into birds. And so it'd be reasonable to study, in the case of the first one, which is a kind of a newt, that genes 2 through 5 control their front feet, whereas genes 20 to 22 control the hind feet. In a salamander, genes 2 to 5 are for the front feet, and 16 to 18 are for the hind feet. That's different. Then we have a frog that the front genes for the front feet are 2 through 4. The hind feet is from 8 to 10. A lizard, his front feet are 6 to 9. The hind feet are 25 to 30. And as you can see right here between the amphibians, the frog, the lizard, which is a reptile, that there are different orientations. Now, when we move to the birds, we have a swift and a grebe. The wings are controlled in the swift by 10 through 14, and the hind leg by 20 to 27. No other creature had that big a spread. With the grebe, the wing is from 15 to 18, and the hind leg is from 26 to 35. You can make all the mutations that you want. You'll never change any of these amphibians or reptiles into birds. It just won't happen because they're different. Now, Gavin de Beer is an extremely proficient embryologist of the 20th century. And he made this statement: but if it is certain that through genetic codes, the genes that code for different enzymes that synthesize the proteins are responsible in a way that we still do not know in embryology for the differentiation of the various parts of animals. What mechanism is there that can cause the production of homologous organs and their same patterns are not controlled by the same genes? He asked this question in 37. It was still unanswered in 71. It's still unanswered at this time. There is no answer to it. You can't get around it. The genes are different that control similar homologous parts in animals. Now, one of a real evangelist for evolution was Ernst Haeckel. He was a very fervent, diligent. He rented halls and packed it out, went traveling all over to promote evolution. Here we have a drawing of the life history of a simple organism. Guess what? It has a name called moneurons, but they do not exist. It is simply a drawing. It is non-existent. Mr. Haeckel had an assistant, and he asked him to bring him drawings, careful drawings, of a dog embryo and of a human embryo. These are seen at the top of our page. Can you tell distinct differences between the dog on the left and the human embryo on the right? Very, very different. Well, Mr. Haeckel took these drawings and made some adjustments. Now you see at the bottom of the page the dog and human embryos look almost identical. I told you so. Evolutionists are very good at making excellent drawings of things that do not exist. That is not science. And furthermore, we have a drawing here of Pithecanthropus alalus, which means the speechless ape. Here you have Mr. Speechless Ape and Mrs. Speechless Ape. Obviously, they had no marital problems as they could not talk. This was totally based on nothing. There was not one bone or skeletal reference. It was just a drawing that Haeckel made of his idea of the ape man and ape woman. Ernst Haeckel is best known for this series of embryos shown above here of a fish, salamander, turtle, chicken, rabbit, and human. They all look very similar one to another. And for years, this has been one of the icons of evolution, a proof and evidence, forceful evidence of the similarity between these embryos. This just shows and points towards evolution. The problem is they're just drawings. The bottom row of photographs are the actual embryos of these very same species at the very same time. You see marked difference between the drawings and their actual photographs of these embryos. That is dishonesty. That is fraud. And that's what's been perpetrated upon us as evolution, when it's not there at all. One of the other icons of evolution is the famous peppered moth. Here we can see the black version of the moth on a lichen-covered tree and the light-covered one. Can you see him? I can't either, but he's there. The peppered moth has, in England, in the 1800s, has two presentations. It has the dark-colored one and the light-colored one. In the early 1800s, the white moth, or lighter colored, tended to dominate in a 90-95% portion of the population. The black or darker one was about 5 to 10%. When the Industrial Revolution got into full swing, there was a lot of contaminants going into the air, and so the bark of trees was darkened. And so now you can see the light-colored moth much more clearly, and the dark one is less visible. Finally, the government said after a number of years that it was time to stop so much pollutants and eliminate this, and so the actual covering, the actual bark of the trees became more of a transparent color, more the way that it really was, as we see in this picture. And then again, the population changed. I failed to mention when the tree was blackened like that, now the black or dark version of the peppered moth was 90 to 95%, and the white was 5 to 10%. A real change in population. Now that the tree barks are of a similar color, that the black moth is less of the population, 5 or 10%, and the white is a higher one to 90, 95%. They said, there you have it. Evolution right before your eyes. Well, in 1800 they were moths, white and black. In the Industrial Revolution they were moths, white and black. Today they're moths, white and black. That's not evolution, those are moths. Plus, all of these pictures of these moths are dead moths glued to the trees. In the natural, they are never seen on tree barks. The best indication is they hide in the high upper leaves of the trees. This is deceptive information. And the thing is, there's no evolution. They were always white and black moths. They still are. That is no evolution whatsoever. When you leave some food out, or some fruit that gets too long, you have these little bitty mosquitoes that form, little bugs, flies that form. They're called fruit flies. Drosophila is their scientific name, and they're able to be recently born and become parents within 10 to 15 days. They have an extremely short regenerative cycle, and so they have been subjected over a period of 100 years to all kinds of circumstances, chemicals, whatnot, to provoke mutations. Heat and cold, light and darkness, gases, X, Y, Z rays, you name it, all kinds of things to produce different kinds of mutations. And then they've gotten them. Here we have some of the fruit flies that have 8 legs. This one has curved wings, just flies in circles. This one turned out a lot darker colored. This one doesn't have any wings. What would you call him? A fly or a crawl? This one has sepia eyes, and this one has rayado eyes. Now the thing is, they've made many mutations. This particular version, where it should have an antenna, has another eye. And this one is the classic one, because this one has 4 wings. Guess what? 4 wings instead of 2. Can't fly. The wings are a hindrance. They don't even work. Can you imagine having an airplane that normally has 2 wings, now has 4 wings, but you still have the same size motor? It'd be kind of hard to get off the ground. Once there was some fruit flies that turned out blind, and so they set those apart, had them breed amongst themselves. In 3 to 4 generations, their sight returned. It's like the blind gene or the blind mutation wasn't accepted, and sight, which was part of the original program, came back. And after some 33,000 different mutations, guess what? They are still fruit flies. Haven't changed in anything else. The lungfish of Africa is considered a classic example of evolution because it only has 1 lung. And first of all, the fossils of the lungfish are identical to the living ones. Now the lungfish lives in lakes and rivers of Africa, and when there's a dry season, just before all the water dries up out of the river or lake, these lungfish form themselves into a ball and bury themselves into the mud. The drought can go on for a month, 3 months, 3 years. When the waters and rains come back, the lungfish comes out, reproduces, and is perfectly fine. Exactly the way he was designed to be. Now again, in this book that I had about fish, here's another article that I took out. This is about the lungfish, a creature of transition. The lungfish above, though classified as a fish, is a notable example of the phase of transition that the primitive fish could have known. Did you hear that? Could have known. Did they see it? No. Have they tested it? No. Have they verified it? No. But could have known before converting themselves into amphibians like the salamander below. Again, they're very good at making up fascinating stories. This is not science. Here's an interesting little bit of mutation. This husband and wife had twins. One's a white boy and one's a dark-colored skin boy. They're both from the same man and wife. They're twins. It's just a strange mutation that happened, that one was produced without melanin, lighter colored skin, the other one had more melanin. But they're still human beings. Nothing really big about that. This African couple has 3 children that are albinos. They have a mutation that inhibits the production of melanin, which is the coloring that gives to our skin. some more, some less. But the thing is, of course, they're human beings. They'll have to be careful going out in the sun, as they don't have the melanin to protect themselves from the rays of the sun. And so they need to be careful, but they're still human beings. It is a mutation, though. Then we have the famous bombardier beetle. As you can see here in the picture, they're grabbing one of his legs with the tweezers, and he's turned around his rear end cannon and is blasting away at whatever's grabbing his leg. The bombardier beetle is a fascinating creature because inside of his body he has two chambers where hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone are stored. They're given certain inhibitors until the right moment when another inhibitor is given, so these chemicals mix and actually produce an explosion at 100 degrees centigrade. It's his way of protecting himself. Here we show a series where he's walking in front of a toad. The toad says, look at that. There's an easy lunch. The next picture shows the toad just about to gobble up the bombardier beetle. But the bombardier beetle had turned, fired his cannon right up the toad's mouth. And in our final picture, the bombardier beetle goes merrily on his way, and the toad is there with, I got blasted in the mouth. Now, how did the bombardier beetle figure out how to do that? Was it a series of mutations? You know, can you just imagine some night, Mom bombardier beetle's about to put one of baby bombardier beetle to bed, and all of a sudden you hear, boom! Mommy, what was that? Oh, that was your uncle. He didn't know how to mix the stuff, and he blew himself up. Ridiculous. They were doing what they were designed to do, and they do it quite well. In this London Natural History Museum Darwin exhibit, it says, when weasels breed together, they produce more weasels like themselves. Amazing! That's exactly what biology says. Weasels have weasels, cats have cats, pigs have pigs, dogs have dogs. That's the law of biology, according to their species, according to their kind. Do dogs change? They most certainly do, in different dogs, but they are still dogs. And they just have more and more dogs. Now, if we were to take an example of, for example, a wolf, and that these little colored beads here represent genetic information, the wolf is maybe the dog kind that went on the ark. And then we begin to breed these and get these into different things like a coyote, a dingo, a Scottish pastor, a bulldog, and then finally a poodle. Now, cats have different genes than dogs, so they don't come into the discussion. But when we get to a poodle, they are truly, as we see in this picture, we've gone from a wolf to a coyote, a dingo, a collie, and a poodle is losing constantly because of genetic manipulation, loss of information. We're not getting more, we're getting less. And actually the poodle is cute and cuddly and kind of look like a little sheep that they are. They're actually a tremendous problem of all kinds of congenital problems that they have. And here's just a list, if you want to just look over the tremendous problems that poodles have. They're really nice and cute for pets, but they're a real problem health-wise. Comparing the Great Dane with the little Chihuahua, there's a vast difference in size. They're both dogs, but you can do all the genetic manipulation you want with the Chihuahuan, and he'll never become a Great Dane. He's lost all kinds of information that he can never go back on. Always, the thing is, these manipulations of genes causes a loss of information, not getting new information. Now, the thing I want to show you next is what, in my opinion, is God's favorite animal to make fun of the evolutionists. Do you know which one it is? That's right, the platypus duckbill. The platypus duckbill was first found in the late 1790s in Australia, when the first colonists from England had gone to that giant continent island and found the platypus. They were so impressed by him, they sent some samples back to England. Well, the English scientists thought that this was some kind of a joke, that some kind of a Chinese taxidermist. A taxidermist is the guy that when you go out hunting and shoot that big buck or catch a big fish, that he'll fix it and mount it on your wall so you can always have that trophy there. That some Chinese taxidermist had sewed together different animals to make the platypus. Let's take a look at what some of the characteristics of the platypus are. He has a bill like a duck, but it's fleshy. Exterior fur like a bear. Internal fur like a sheep. Lays eggs like reptiles and birds. Has a tail like a beaver. Gives milk like a mammal, but without nipples. Is nocturnal like an owl. Walks like a reptile. Clucks like a hen. Eats meat like a fish. Has webbed feet and is aquatic like an otter. Uses sonar like the dolphins. The male has poison like a serpent. Has claws like a rooster. Its eggs like those of a tortoise. It's able to detect electrical impulses. The living ones are just like their fossils. What is it? Platypus duckbill. Where did it come from? Parents, platypus duckbills. What will it be? The platypus. And see, that's a real problem for evolution because it looks like so many different animals, but it keeps being the same thing, as God said, according to his species. And that's what we have right now is here in Genesis 1, in chapters 11, 12, 21, 24, and 25, 10 different times we have after his kind, or the equivalent. God established the rule first, after his kind, or after its kind. Genesis 1, 10 times. The second law of biology. They're always producing according to their kind. Never anything unusual comes up. And the Bible thoroughly recognizes the different variety of species, be it variety amongst us as human beings, varieties among dogs, varieties among frogs, variety among horses, ferns, roses. They're all varieties, but according to their kind, as the Bible had already said. Now, one of the things that people have said is a real evidence of evolution are what are called Darwin's finches. There are some 13 finches that are found in the Galapagos Islands. And the difference between them are the different shapes of their beaks, according to the different food supplies. Now, Darwin and others have said that this is evidence that they had a common ancestor. I believe they had a common ancestor, and I believe it was a bird. I don't think it was a tomato. I don't think it was a penicillin or a fly. I believe it was a bird. And of course, that's the main thing. And that's all that they've ever been able to show. Now, one of the real things too for evolution is what they call vestigial organs. These are sort of like leftovers, things that evolution used at one time, but now they just don't serve any purpose. Whatever purpose they had before, we don't know, but they're just leftovers. Over 100 years ago, a scientist named Wiedersheim made a list of 180 structures and human organs that, according to him, were useless, evolutionary leftovers. After a century of scientific and medical research, we now know that all of them are important to humans. Some are absolutely vital for life. Two of the more famous ones we still have, one is the appendix. They say the appendix isn't worth anything. Two very interesting things. One is that the survivors of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, Japan, those that still had their appendix suffered less from the radioactive fallout than those that did not have their appendix. And also today we're finding that people that still have their appendix do not succumb to as many diseases as those that do have their appendix removed. The appendix seems to serve some function in immunizing a person against various diseases, but when it's removed, that capacity is lost. Also, the coccyx, that very tip end of your backbone, is called to be, well, that's just a leftover when you used to have a tail. That's not true. I mean, obviously, everything has to have an end and a beginning. And in this case, our spinal cord has an ending with the coccyx. A friend of mine, Dr. Kent Hovind, was in a debate in which the evolutionists said that the coccyx was a leftover. This is what he says. An evolutionist told me that one of the proofs of evolution was the human tailbone, or coccyx. He said that it was a vestigial, leftover organ that we no longer need. Having taught anatomy and biology, I told him that I knew of 9 small muscles attached to the tailbone that are very important for him to perform certain functions. But if he felt the tailbone was vestigial, I would pay to have it removed. In less than 24 hours, he would realize that a mistake he had made. My offer still stands. And that's a fact. The offer's still there. If you think your tailbone's a leftover, Dr. Hovind will pay to have it removed for you. But within 24 hours, you will realize that it's very important for a daily function, that I won't tell you what it is, that you really need to have it there for those muscles attached to it. Others say that evidence of evolution is bacterial resistance or to antibiotics, or insects that are resistant to pesticides. What we've been able to learn is that actually these bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics are actually the inferior bacteria. They lack the proper enzyme that connects with the antibiotic, which eventually causes the bacteria's death. But because they don't have those right enzymes, the antibiotic does not affect the bacteria, and so it lives. These are not the best bacteria. These are the ones that have already lost information. As we look over this evidence, it's amazing that we see the Creator. We don't see chance happening, and we see the design that even with the mutations, they still stay according to their species, according to their kind. Stay in tune. We have more interesting and helpful things to share that you'll get a lot out of, and will be a really best blessing to others as well. God bless you. We'll see you soon.